Tom, my man, great seeing you. You're one of my favorites, so it's good to see you, pal.
It's great to see you, Dave. I hear you obviously all the time. I see you on TV, but I miss being with you in person. Yeah, we could go on and on just about how much I love you and appreciate you, but great to see you virtually.
If there is a list of top 10 all-time combination at ESPN of great broadcasters and great hangs, like people that you'd want to spend as much time as possible with that are also great on the air, Tom Rinaldi is by far in the top 10, probably top 5.
Well, that's vastly overstating it, but thank you, Dave, because we've had a few hangs. I hope they were more than tolerable. Yeah.
Oh man, I miss him. I miss him for sure. I'm so happy things are going well for you at Fox. And obviously, you had the Cardinals game on Sunday. What was it like, other than the fact you were probably sweating to death through that suit? What was it like down on the Cardinals sideline?
We were talking just briefly a moment ago, Dave, about just how really unusual the game flow was and what the Cardinals showed. And in a way, what the Niners showed there, particularly in the second half. I mean, going in at halftime, you either get the coach heading in or coming out. It JG likes to handle it going in. And I thought he said the pick that Tyler threw that Bosa had. He said he wasn't worried about that. It's a mistake. Those happen. He has a next play mentality. He won't linger in that moment. That didn't happen. So that was correct. Number two, he said, listen, you got to credit them for the penetration on the blocked field goal, but that can't happen. So it didn't happen again. Three, he said, we have to do a better job of getting their guys on the ground, Tom. Like at the point of contact, there's a lot of missed tackles. That's not us. We're missing a lot of tackles. That did continue, Dave, right? We saw that. We saw some key 3, 4, 5 yards in front of the sticks catches that were converted. And yet, when you got to that fourth quarter, first of all, hats off defensively, holding them scoreless, the turnover battle, which is such a huge indicator, but the spirit and competitive fight of the team to pull that off, Dave, I think was really significant. I think that's a really, really good win.
You mentioned JG and what he said to you on the field. And by the way, I have to clarify every question I ask with you. I have to really think about because you're the master at asking questions. So I have to make sure that
Calm down.
I'm being graded here. I feel like I'm being graded. It's like
Not at all.
it's like Jeff Van Gundy used to say when he was coaching and Hubie Brown was broadcasting, because from working with Hubie, he's always taking notes that Jeff always wanted to ask Hubie after the coaches meeting, did I pass?
That's amazing. But can I, one tiny quick anecdote on Hubie Brown. I was coaching our son's CYO basketball league. For those that don't know, kind of like the church league. Our son was a middle schooler. I was helping out, and I asked Hubie for a baseline inbounds play, baseline inbound play to try to score. 45 minutes later, and 13 cocktail napkins, I had 13 inbound plays from UB Brown. No lie. The next weekend, we ran one, 9 seconds to go in the game. You right? Ball. Who's the most open person? The inbounder. Get it to the guy, go to the side inbounder, bang. The team won by one. UB Brown.
It's so good. And it's so
So
Hubie. He's always willing to help. And like you're speaking his language when you're asking for that kind of stuff. He's going to give you
100%.
something good.
100%.
And he loves you. He loved working with
Oh,
you.
he's such a great guy, such a great person.
Just turned 91, by the way, and
Yeah,
still going strong.
amazing, amazing.
So tell me the production meeting with JG. So we don't, for radio, have a production meeting like you guys have, but in preseason
Sure.
when we do TV, we get to meet with JG. And obviously, you and I have done hundreds of these, and some coaches, they don't want to be there. They're just checking a box to move on to the next thing. JG is great in terms of enthusiasm, energy, information. Have you guys found that as well when you meet with him?
No question about it. I also think, Dave, in this case, there's an advantage of having covered the Eagles a lot. When I first came over to Fox, they're obviously in the conference that we cover, and they were obviously very competitive, a relevant team deep into seasons and postseason, including the Super Bowl. I had the Eagles, the sideline for the Super Bowl. So getting to know him in that regard, Dave, I think also he knows Kevin. So there's a familiarity there, which I think lends to maybe a bit more candor. I loved the time with him. I'll share one thing, Dave, that I thought he did a wonderful job with. I asked the following question. You get so much out of these meetings that you can never use on air, but sometimes these are answers that you can apply to your life. I have an item in my phone in the notes section just called Advice for Living, and it's filled with answers that I've gotten that I know are never going to make air, but that I feel like can apply to my life. Here was one of the questions I asked Gannon. How do you constructively and directly critique a player without costing him his belief? And his answer was phenomenal. And he sort of started and ended, Dave, with know yourself, know the room, know the outcome you want. Know who you are as you ask. Know who the player is as he listens. Know the outcome you're both wanting to reach. He said, and to me, that's a definition of emotional intelligence. That's what I try to lead with, knowing those three things. How good is that? How clear is that? This is somebody, just starting on his head coaching journey, in essence. And I think to possess that, he was talking, Dave, really powerfully and in a really positive way about the film session after the Commanders. And him saying, I know guys that would have thrown chairs, that would have knocked over projectors. The guys know. They already feel bad. He said, maybe when we play better, that's when I lean harder. But let's always know those three things. Know yourself, know the room/player, know the outcome you both want. I thought that was really valuable.
That's fantastic. And it does sound like something JG would say.
Yeah.
Sure. And obviously, you've gotten to know him well the last handful of years. It's clear the players believe in him. His energy is not fake energy, it's who he is. Do you sense that when you're down on the field Sunday? Do you sense that belief amongst the players? Because there's times I'm sure you've been on sidelines or you've covered players or coaches where you can tell like they don't believe in this guy. But that does not seem the case at all here.
I agree. And I think one of the interesting things to go back to the production call, Dave, that he shared was before going into the Monday session. How many coaches would do this? He said he went to Buddha and he said to Buddha, what's the tone you want from me in this room? You. Think about the security to go. Now, listen, Buddha's Buddha. He is who he is on this team. He's its heart. He's its soul. He's its old head. But as a young coach, Dave, to go to that guy and ask that to him, and Buddha told him, be you. You're authentic. Be you. The guys are with you. And I think that's one of the reasons why, as strange as the game shape was, it's a significant outcome because of what the prior outcome had been. Right? Such a disappointing performance in all the phases. And now you give up not a fluke play, but you just don't often see a block for a touchdown return. You give that up. You're falling into what can feel like the pattern of we're a Super Bowl champion team in the opening drive, and then we can't sustain that. It seemed to happen again, but to rally there. I also think, Dave, these decisions that work out are never as scrutinized as the ones that don't. There was zero hesitation on that sideline immediately. As soon as that flag was thrown for Kyler being hit in the face, immediately he called to go for the 2-point conversion. Immediately. I don't know if that's a standing policy to say if we get that chance, we're going to do it no matter what. Obviously, you know, we have James in a way that we think is a battering ram. It could, whatever it is, that changed the whole game. That one decision and the execution behind it changed the game.
100%. That's great perspective. Appreciate. I know the Cardinal fans do. You sharing that because that's some insight that they normally wouldn't get. JG did tell us in the post-game interview with Paul Calvisi, our sideline reporter, that they were thinking about going into the drive, maybe going for 2, and then the penalty clinched it. And we said that on the air too, that it's got to be part of the thinking there, getting that penalty, because the analytics percentage-wise change dramatically when you go from the 2 to the 1. You've known Kyler, I imagine, for a long time. I'm not sure if you did anything on him coming out of high school when you were at ESPN, but obviously at A&M and then at Oklahoma, and now since you've been at Fox with the NFL. You interviewed him after the game yesterday. How have you seen him grow, not just as a player, but as a person over the last 10 years?
So, Dave, can I tell you something I found fascinating? And again, something I got in the car afterward. I told guys on the way out of the stadium. You know this, Dave. When you do those post-game interviews, there's a little lag time there. They decided to do this live, so he and James, who we were both gracious enough to do it, waited a couple of minutes so that we could do it live. And Kyler was shaking his head, and I asked him, and he said, "I'm a little irritated." I said, "Why?" And without getting into all the specifics, Dave, it's because he said, "I get that that's a really good football team there, but man, I made too many mistakes today. We made too many mistakes today." Like, this is moments after that win on the road, divisional, moments after. That speaks, Dave, toward, and that can be tricky. You can be a perfectionist, and that can carry its own burdens, or it can drive you to be better. Who's able to really dig in and scrutinize themselves in victory as opposed to defeat? This is moments after victory, and that's what Kyler's given you. I mean, we joked with him about throwing the finger up 40 yards away. He smiled at being told that it was the fastest run by a quarterback, and I forget how many seasons. He nearly got to 22 miles an hour. But he just, I've seen him grow and he realizes, and he said this in our production call, Dave, sorry for these long answers, but all this stuff is fresh and doesn't get in when you do the sideline, that he now understands. 39 of the 53 guys have turned over in the last 2 years. He's now the veteran. He's now the guy that's been there, as opposed to the vets that helped him. And I think his awareness of that filters into part of what he carries with the franchise now.
First of all, your answers are not too long. And second of all, are you trying to say that the play-by-play guy and the analyst talk too much in the booth and the reporters
Never. No, we can't ever hear Tom Brady or Kevin Burkhardt talk too much. No way. No way.
I'm just kidding. I do want to get to Tom in a second. I watched you after you interviewed James Conner. I saw as James is walking away, you got his attention, and you guys had a moment. I imagine you, at some level, told the story of James and his cancer battle when you were at ESPN. Am I correct in that? And
you are.
And just tell me about that relationship, because one thing that makes you great at what you do is you have a way with people where, and I know it's real because I've been around you a lot, where you get people to trust you because you're genuine and you care about them. So how did that relationship start with James? And I gotta imagine it's pretty cool to see where he is now based on what he's overcome.
So we really wanted to get this note in, Dave. I don't know. I guess I felt a little conflicted that it might feel a little bit self-serving. Um, we didn't get the note in. James played beautifully, uh, and I was really happy for him. I do think there are fantasy players, there are NFL fans who incredibly don't know James Conner's story. They don't know that he he hurts his knee seriously at Pitt after a really promising beginning. The rehab isn't going well. Coach Narduzzi at Pitt sort of says, "Hey, what is going on with you?" And Conner says, "I'm just so fatigued. I don't know. Okay, let's really get you fully checked out. Chest X-ray, cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, 12 sessions of chemotherapy, trains and practices non-contact through chemo." Let that land on anyone who hears this for a second, who knows anyone touched by the scourge of cancer and chemo. Practiced through it, comes back, has a tremendous career at Pitt. We are with him when he gets drafted. We embedded with a handful of players, so we were with James when he got drafted, by the Steelers. He's an Erie, Pennsylvania guy. After that day, he said something to me I'll never forget. This is what I wanted to get on the telecast, and it's the last thing we shared with each other after he was kind enough to do the interview. He said to me, "Tom, I know that the story has inspired people, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm going to be a better player than I am a story." And the last thing he said to me before we ran in that locker room, looked at me and said, "Better player," and ran off. Uh, how do you not love that player? How do you not admire that player, that will, that heart, that strength? And that's, one of the first texts I got was from Mike Gallagher, and a really important father figure in James' life after the game, just saying, "Please thank Tom Brady for the kindness that he shared about James during this game." I mean, you do this long enough, Dave. Yes, we have our childhood teams and we root for those, but you root for people. And I don't know how you don't root for James Conner.
Well, you're first of all going to make me cry, which is no surprise. We used to joke at ESPN that when Tom Rinaldi walks into a stadium, grown men start weeping because of. I mean, it's a great story, but your storytelling obviously is sensational. And James Conner, we love him here. I think Mike Tomlin, if you asked him behind closed doors, he
Mm.
might say that was the one that got away. That's the mistake, not keeping him a few years back. But anyway, let's move on to Tom because Tom Brady, because you just mentioned him. What's that been like? You and I have worked with a lot of people in this business who are famous for something other than broadcasting, whether coaching or playing, and sometimes you can tell they're not all in. They're not doing their homework. It's just something for them to pass the time and a way to stay in the game. That does not seem like the case with Tom Brady, just based on what I've heard and then what I've seen. So tell me what it's like working with him, being around him, and spending each week with him, because it, as you know, becomes like family when you're on the road together 3, 4 days a week.
So on the first point, uh, he is as prepared, invested, and committed as anyone I've ever seen on any crew I've worked on. And Dave, we've worked on a bunch of different crews across a bunch of different sports. You and I have, and he is the equal to anyone who you would define as committed, prepared, and invested. He cares greatly about succeeding at this. Uh, Obviously, he's unequaled when it comes to football IQ and his POV from the booth. The television piece is brand new. And here he is, I think, they making incredible leaps forward great progress game to game, and we finally got a good game. We did not really have competitive games, quarters, even portions of quarters through our first stages of this season. We got a terrific game Sunday with the Cardinals and the Niners, and I think it was Tom's best game. I think those do go hand in hand. Although I think Tom's been terrific when there's been blowouts and he's been able to be more expansive about anything from roster construction to locker room culture to quarterback execution to defensive alignment, all of it. But to me, selfishly, that's equaled or bested by him as a teammate. Humble, authentic, earnest, curious, all the things that you want. Super high EQ, super high IQ, engages the entire room, doesn't make it about himself, pushes it off, and tries to gain from others as often as he can. I shared this elsewhere. Dave, one of the things though, we go out, we have team dinners on Saturday. Tom's diet is legendary in its discipline and how clean he eats. And so I'm still trying to navigate my own self talk as the fried calamari gets passed my way, as the extra meatball comes my way, as a little dessert enters the orbit, like, and I'm giving the side eye, like, to which he said to me, I thought this was great. Hey, Tom, I don't care what you eat. I care what I eat. Eat what you want. Which I thought was great. I'm still not over it, but I think that was great.
Oh, that's amazing, man. That's so good. A couple more, we'll get you out of here. One thing I do want to ask you about because I just don't think enough people know. I think people assume that you have been a journalist since birth. You have been covering hard news stories and sports since you came out of the womb, but you were not a broadcaster in your early life. Tell us.
No, no, that's right. I was a teacher. I was a high school teacher and a coach in two very different ends of the spectrum. I uh, I went to college in Philadelphia. I taught at a private school in Pittsburgh, fantastic school. Shady Side Academy is the name of it. I taught high school 9 through 12. I coached there. I coached hoop and soccer. And then I went to the other end of the educational spectrum in our country. I taught public high school in the South Bronx in New York City, in what was at the time the poorest congressional district in America. So I did that for a few years. I coached there as well. And then I ultimately I went back to school, and that was for journalism. And then I began my career in news. I was in Indiana, Oregon, California, and then got a tremendous break, made my way into sports, and I've really had every piece of timing, every good break that you could ever have along the way. And I have a lottery winning gig, and I have for, my God, like, well over 2 decades.
How do you connect with people as well as you do? Because that's a skill. And I know that's who you are, but your relationship, for example, with Tiger Woods. And I think you told the story, and tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm getting this wrong, that when he came back from everything he went through, when you interviewed him after, or maybe it was before, he looked at you and said, "Thank you for standing by me." Am I right on that story?
No, yeah, that I did the first interview with Tiger after everything that had happened in his personal life. No, there was no exchange like that afterward. We had an interesting exchange prior for another time, but after Tiger won the Masters, Dave, in 2019, we did a sit down, and those weren't his exact words, but essentially, Dave, you know, he acknowledged, "Hey, you know what I've been through." And obviously he'd been through a lot, some of his own making, as he would say, some far from his own making when it comes to his body breaking down and things of that nature. And uh, Tiger, I have no idea why, Dave, and I've said this before, has been great to me. And if he were on this Zoom somehow, I think he would make a joke and say, "Yeah, I have no idea why either, Tom." But he's been so cordial and good to me. And I've asked him hard questions. He's answered them. I've he just has been. And I've said this elsewhere, Dave, when I'm not on any forms of social media, but when my dad passed, which is back in 2013, you know, I don't know how anybody outside my family and friend communities knew, but people in sport knew, and some reached out and were wonderful. But I got one handwritten note about the passing of my father, and that was Tiger. Sometimes judgment is fueled by distance. Judgment obviously begins with, how did Dave treat me? How did Dave perceive that I treated him? And I also think that sometimes, I don't know how this has happened, we try to place judgment before understanding. So I think one of the ways to connect with people, Dave, is to try to understand them as best you can, to in the ways they will allow you to, and to do that with empathy and curiosity, but not with judgment.
Do you have a story or two when you look back that have been the most challenging to tell, either because of the delicacy of the story or the person that you were interviewing? Is there anything that really stands out above the others? Because you've kind of seen it all in many different sports.
You know, Dave, I don't know that I'll give a specific answer here, but one thing I will say is, if someone, I'm perennially amazed with these two things: what people bear, the strength that people possess to bear through what they do in life's challenge, and their capacity to share it, their willingness to be open and share their trial, their challenge, their experience. And I deeply believe, Dave, if someone's going to entrust you with that, honoring that trust, it's burdensome. You should feel burdened by that. You should want to do everything you can to honor that trust. And you do so through accuracy, through empathy, through curiosity. Those are the ways to honor the trust people place in you to share their stories. Because at the end of the day, that's what we possess. That's what we have. I won't get into, I'm sure people listening to this and know this, who know about you, Dave, the incredible, just the selfless things you do for other people, the the things you've done for the community in the wake of COVID, et cetera. And as I played a tiny, tiny part in that. I learned about one person's story through you. And so in learning about that person, are you moved? Do you want to act upon it? Or does it just become something, and this is great too, that enters into who you are and your broader understanding of how we're connected, what our challenges are? It's such an honor and a privilege, Dave, to have people share these really difficult parts of their lives with you, but also to share their triumphs. Look at James yesterday. Look at what he did yesterday. You can look at it and say, what does it really mean that you carry a football and you win a regular season? It means a lot. It's inspiring. To me, it is. I still really, really believe in the magic of sport.
Last one of the most challenging stories that I had to tell, and I'm so glad you were there, was in 2011 when my normal broadcast crew of me, Chris Spielman, and Urban Meyer, who was in between the
Yeah.
Florida and the Ohio State jobs. And at that
Yep.
point, there was a lot of discussion about Urban maybe being the successor to Joe Paterno. And our broadcast crew gets assigned Penn State, Nebraska, right after the Jerry Sandusky scandal. That week, Joe Paterno on Wednesday night is fired. and there is a riot in State College, and we're all flying in on Thursday, and you're with us that week, along with several executives who were there for good
Yeah.
reason. With again, there was more than just the game. There was a lot going on that week, and I remember I picked your brain, I think, for 3 straight days about what to say, how to say it. I remember Jay Paterno, who kind of,
Sorry about that.
no, you're fine. Jay Paterno, who was basically the acting, in a way, head coach, just because the connection with his dad, said to you in the production meeting, "You're not going to make me cry. You're not going to make me cry," in the post game interview, and you did, of course, because again, because of the connection that he had with you. But what do you recall from that experience, and do you take pride, because again, you helped me so much in helping younger broadcasters in those situations where you've got to be careful with how you word things and phrase things. It's not just 1st and 10, run play, pass play, time and score. There's all these things going on that impact how you call 1st and 10, especially in that situation.
Well, and that's one of the reasons, Dave. I'm not just saying this. I've said it to you. I've texted it to you. I've shared it with you many times. Why I think you're amazing at what you do. Because not only are you able to, with great acumen, to handle the technical aspects of chronicling a live event, unscripted for multiple hours in a row, but it's informed by your humanity. Your humanity has the capacity to understand a context beyond 1st and 10, 4th and short. And that was a great display of that, Dave. That's why you were a perfect person to do that game and lead that team of voices to go across the country. And it had been an unprecedented situation, not in college football, Dave. I think you'd agree. In American sport, it had been unprecedented. And then within this, oh, yeah, there's a competition to be held and broadcast and explained and chronicled live. I think your ability to do that is informed by your heart and your humanity. It's backed up by incredible technical proficiency. But sometimes, Dave, you hear this notion that to be a journalist, you have to, by definition, have a distance from the subject. And I agree with that in some instances, but I've obviously not really subscribed to that. That I've gone another way. I think I've tried to lead with connection or humanity, and there's risk in that. And I think a lot of big J journalists would look at what I do pretty critically. And I understand that criticism. I just know that for me to be authentic to who I am, I do try to lead with my humanity. At least in sport, we're not chronicling wrongdoing, things of that nature. When I go back to that game, Dave, I think of how much care you put into wanting to get the tone right, wanting to get the context right. And then, with that as a foundation, letting the game happen and chronicling it. And it was masterful. You did a great job. And that's in a way why we go into the business that we do. Because no game situation, Saturday or Sunday, is ever the same, let alone one like that.
Well, first of all, you're going to make me cry with a compliment. Here we go again, twice, and Rinaldi's got me almost in tears. But I
I
and I
mean that,
appreciate the
Dave. I
compliment.
mean that.
But it was, yeah, the question more centering around kind of how you've impacted people, and I think what you just said, that you're about people. You're not just covering a story. You're not just trying to win an Emmy. You're trying to serve the person, which I love, and I think, because it's hard to connect with viewers. It's hard to connect with fans because there's so many broadcasters. There's so many of us. But again, you have found a way because of who you are and how you do your job to connect with us, people you're working with, to connect with the players or the coaches you're covering, to connect with the audience. And that's why, like when you're on, I may hear something from your mouth, whether it's as a reporter, a host, doing a feature that is going to strike a chord, and that's rare. That's so hard to do. So for everybody that wants to get into the business we're in, study Tom Rinaldi. Like that's take notes. like Jeff said, Hubie takes notes when Jeff was coaching. Be Hubie, take notes, or be you. You said you have this list of sayings. I can only imagine some of the people you have. You don't have to repeat the sayings, but who are some of the people that you have taken information from? Last question that you have in your
Wow.
phone. So I don't want you to have to like divulge any secrets about information that they've shared, but what people that you really look up to that you've covered that you take something from?
Wow. There are so many, Dave. I'm
Sorry, I
gonna
don't mean to put you on the spot. Just
No, that's no problem. I mean, but I would say easily, Dave, the top two are Saban and Rafael Nadal. Those would be the top two in terms of things that they have shared with me or said to me that I've tried to apply to my life. Saban is has so much wisdom and is such an incredible leader and such an example of the good parts, the best parts of discipline and how to lead your life. And Rafa, I think, is to me the single most enduring portrait of the power of humility in any great athlete I've ever covered. And we are around great people, but Rafa is singular in his humility and to me in his humanity. Again, another person who's been incredibly kind toward me. Tiger is certainly on that list. Federer is on that list. Doug Collins, who we both love, has a lot of wisdom that he has passed along. I think is an absolutely amazing human being. There are so many, and like I remember Kyle Shanahan, who's amazing on production calls, sharing something about like how you build a culture of accountability, or the a question that a coach recently answered that uh, Harbaugh with the Ravens answered, Dave, an amazing answer about communicating a tough message to a player. I'll share this. He just said, check yourself first, Dave. What are you leading with? What is coming from you? Are you mad that we lost and it looks bad for you? If that's the case, own that, know that, and realize that's what the player is going to hear first. Or are you leading with your heart? Is your heart the first thing that reaches the player? Your ego or your heart? How do you not take in every relationship you have, how do you not take wisdom from that? We are in these amazing spots to hear from these accomplished men and women in sport. And it's such a privileged spot.
Well, you've always led with your heart, and that's why you're the best, man. And I love you. I appreciate you doing this, Tommy, because I know you got a busy schedule. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dave.